I want to talk a bit about Dell, which is not a story that we have revisited in a while. Coming public, but one that we're worth doing now, because there is a showdown looming between Dell Technologies and the shareholders who own the tracking stock for its 81% stake in VMware, as widespread opposition amongst those shareholders to the plan for buying in that tracking stock forces Dell's owners, Michael Dell and Silver Lake, to consider other alternatives, or raise the price they're offering, or drop the plan altogether. Now remember, you may need to go back to July 2nd. That was the day Dell Technologies proposed buying in that VMware tracking stock, which trades under the symbol DVMT, for $109 a share in cash and stock. The transaction would in one fell swoop take Dell public and also allow Michael Dell and Silver Lake to pocket a large portion of the $13 billion difference at the time between the value of VMware's tracking stock and VMware stock itself. Now the deal would deliver 21% ownership of Dell Technologies to holders of DVMT at a valuation of $79.77 a share, along with cash. The morning of the announcement, right here, Michael Dell explained to me why it was the chosen path.
The option to go public was very much there, right? But then you would then later probably convert the tracking stock into the public common, and so you create a little more complexity before you have less complexity. And so if you could do it in one step, that certainly is easier.
But in the 3 months since the deal was announced, opposition to its terms, which require a majority of DVMT holders to approve, has been consistent. While the company is in the midst of a roadshow without Michael Dell to drum up support for the plan, if the hedge funds and a handful of long-only funds I've spoken with are good to their word, the company is not going to have enough support to get the deal through. While the hedge fund Elliott, for example, has chosen not to be the public face of a fight against Dell, it is in opposition to the current plan, as are almost all the hedge funds that own the stock. Their argument for additional value is reflected in a recent letter from P. Schoenfeld Asset Management, which owns about 150 million of DVMT shares. Now, Schoenfeld argues for a 20% increase in the consideration in the form of either an improved equity ratio, more cash, or other alternatives, such as perhaps a contingent value right. And he does not believe that Dell's recent examination of doing an initial public offering of Dell, which could then be followed, and this is what Michael Dell was referring to, by a buy-in of DVMT, would benefit Dell. In the letter, he's quoted as saying, "While we are aware that you claim to be re-examining a Dell IPO, the inescapable conclusion is that such an IPO would cause massively more dilution to the current Dell private shareholders and increase consideration to the DVMT shareholders in the inevitable buy-in," meaning we'd end up with a larger percentage of your company than you currently are willing to give us now, or even if we were to negotiate a higher price. Perhaps. Let me tell you one thing here. There are some pretty lofty valuations for an IPO that Dell recently has received from investment banks that were pitching it. Dell, in fact, may be more inclined to consider the IPO route after taking account of exactly how high those numbers would be. And remember, if it went public, it would then be in a position to buy in the tracking stock at a 20% premium to its trading price. Now, according to people with knowledge of the estimates, take a listen. The banks bidding for Dell came in with valuations, and Jim, I want to get your take on this, ranging from a low of $90 to as high as $135. Whether they were using a sum of the parts, price to levered free cash flow, consolidated EPS multiples, or a multiple to EBITDA, all for, by the way, 2019 estimates. The numbers pitched by the banks, which, by the way, also included Jamie Dimon showing up and Moynihan showing up for B of A, were all well above the $79.77 value of the current deal. You know, Jim, HP trades at 11.7 times, HPE at 10.5 times, Cisco at 16.8 times. So if you say you're going to get an 11 PE, you still get close to $100 a share. This is a 4.8% top-line grower. It's going to have $4.3 billion in fiscal year 2020 free cash flow. Those numbers got their attention. Would they go the IPO route, despite the fact that many believe it would end up being more dilutive and create a lot more uncertainty? And as you heard Michael Dell say, a two-step process? Maybe not, but they're going to need to figure something out, because at this point, it doesn't appear they're going to get this deal through.
David, VMware is one of the fastest growing companies I follow. I had Sanjay Poonen, who's the COO, on last Friday. This company's valued at $64 billion. David, I think it should be valued appreciably more if it were not for the fact that 80% of it is owned by Dell. So I would tell you that if VMware has that Dell has an 80% stake in VMware, David, is probably worth close to $100 billion. Wow. So if that's the case.
Well, that's why some of the banks, when they do a sum of the parts and then a 12.5 to 13.5 multiple, get to 125 to 135.
I have no problem with that analysis.
Insane.
I have no problem with that analysis. David, VMware is the principal way that companies on board to Amazon Web Services. If you want to be on Amazon Web Services, which you know absolutely anyone who's on Oracle might argue they want to be, this is the way to get on. Amazon Web Services is the most powerful new force, secular force in technology. They're the leader. VMware is the way you do it. And this company's only worth $64 billion. Are you kidding me? But everyone's afraid that Michael Dell's going to cram them down. Michael Dell does not impress me as a crammer.
It's going to be an interesting point. 4.8% top line growth, delevering very quickly, generating a good amount of cash. To your point, some of the parts with VMware, which it does intend to keep public. It'll be very interesting. But again, the key point, and we're going to get the filing soon, so we're going to get a date on the vote, is going to be this battle, which they're not going to give in, they say, on the Dell side, and shareholders say, we're voting against.